All right, so you were there at the summit. We just played a bit of what Vice President J.D. Vance had to say. I do want to get your reaction on his comments. He was really focused on regulation in Europe and what he thinks how he thinks that regulation may hamstring the development of AI.
I think that's right. I think it's a pretty good summary of the zeitgeist of this year's Action Summit. The theme has been action and acceleration as opposed to previous years where there was a lot of pessimism. I think the theme has been optimism for what AI can unlock. And there's a ton of excitement and energy around making sure that open source AI, which is pretty critical for many of those industries Vice President Vance mentioned, healthcare, defense, finance, open source is critical to that because there's a ton of sensitive data that's sitting on the infrastructure of these large enterprises, and they need open source to work on their enterprises, on their enterprise infrastructure. So I think it's a pretty good summary of what's been going on here.
So, Anjay, we booked you before we knew a couple of things were going to happen. We booked you before we knew J.D. Vance was going to be there, so thank you for sharing your perspective on that. Also, before we got this headline about the idea that Elon Musk may try to buy a controlling stake in OpenAI, I want to get your take on that. You're very familiar with the industry. You're on the board of Mistral. You're an early investor in Anthropic. What are your thoughts about the possibility of Elon Musk, who was part of the creation of OpenAI, possibly having control or a controlling stake in the company?
Look, thanks for that question. I'm not an expert on Elon's M&A plans, but I will say it's a pretty good sign that AI is becoming a part of national infrastructure conversations at the highest levels amongst both business leaders as well as national leaders. And so while I'm not sure where the actual discussions will go, I do think it means that it's a sign of the times that the leaders of the largest organizations have realized that frontier AI and open source AI has become elevated to the class of general purpose technologies. We've only had a handful of these in history, right? We've had electricity, the internet, and who controls what these models can and can't do has become such a critical topic of debate for both nation-state leaders and folks like Elon that I'm not surprised to hear the kinds of discussions that are happening about OpenAI.
All right, Anjay, on that note, please stick around, stay right there. We have some breaking news and some new comments from OpenAI CEO Sam Altman on the heels of Elon Musk and his bid to take over OpenAI. We're joined by CNBC senior technology correspondent Arjun Gopal. You're live, Arjun, from the AI Action Summit. Share what you're learning. You just talked to Sam Altman just moments ago.
Yeah, that's right. Coming off the back of this proposal from Elon Musk and a consortium led by him to bid for the non-profit part of the OpenAI business for nearly $100 billion. We managed to get a few seconds with Sam Altman as he was walking away and asked him about if he's taking this deal from Elon Musk seriously. Let's listen in.
I think it's to slow down a competitor and try to catch up with his thing, but I don't really know.
Yeah, but you know him well, right?
To the degree anybody does.
So Sam Altman there saying he thinks it's a bid to slow down the progress of OpenAI. And of course, you've got to remember Elon Musk, of course, has his XAI project as well as all the other AI he's investing in, Tesla and some of his other businesses. Look, there's bad blood, we know this, between Elon Musk and Sam Altman. There has been for a long time. Elon Musk is very upset about the direction of travel for OpenAI, turning it into a for-profit organization. His bid, partly the rationale behind that, Elon Musk has said, is around trying to return OpenAI to its open source roots that will benefit the greater good. So this is a feud between two tech giants that certainly is not going away anytime soon, Frank.
Yeah, certainly not going away. And I know you'll be covering the very latest. Our Arjun Gopal live there at the AI Action Summit. I know you have some other great interviews, so hopefully we'll be talking to you throughout the summit. Thank you again. Anjay, I want to come back to you. And I know you said you're not that familiar with Elon Musk and his M&A plans, and that's very fair. But just your take on what Sam Altman had to say, his thoughts that this could be an attempt to actually slow down the development of AI.
Yeah, look, I think the important thing to realize here is that time is running out for a lot of people who have taken for granted, their leads in this AI infrastructure race. We had people in front of Congress testifying just a few months ago that China would take years to catch up to the U.S., right? And I think releases like DeepSeek have shown that actually that's just not true. And so we're in this moment where multiple countries, multiple nation states, multiple labs have decided that being at the frontier of AI is just fundamentally too important of a race to not be participating in wholehearted. And I think that's putting a lot of pressure on multiple closed source folks. Clearly OpenAI is one of those labs that's done a bunch of great work. But I do think, the open source ecosystem is putting a ton of downward pressure on pricing. It's putting a ton of forward pressure on innovation. And I think the reality is that nation states aren't just going to sit around waiting to see what happens in the M&A market. The table stakes here are that you need your own sovereign AI.
Speaking of, we're talking a lot about open source. I feel like we're almost burying the lead, the impact of DeepSeek. I'm sure that's a big topic of conversation there at the AI Action Summit. What is the actual result of the development of DeepSeek and the idea that China's caught up? Now that we've had a few weeks just to kind of catch our breath and really kind of understand what it all means. And we were talking about Meta earlier in the show on a 16-day win streak. One of the companies that does have an open source model. Is that really the key when we're talking about tech and AI companies having both a closed and an open source model?
Yeah, so the important thing to take away from DeepSeek's release is not that it's extraordinarily cheap or it's fantastic engineering. That was sort of expected. Almost like on clockwork, we have open source releases that take what's happening at the frontier and make it more efficient. That's sort of known to us. I think what did catch people by surprise is that this came for the first time from a lab in China. And I think that's changed the geopolitical calculus a little bit for everybody. But ultimately, the beauty of open source is that the rising tide lifts all boats. The ecosystem compounds on itself. So a lab like Mistral in France is able to take some of the best learnings from the DeepSeek release, integrate the best learnings into its own pipeline, and then put out a model that's even better. And that's just the history of open infrastructure and open source. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon. I do think what's happening now is that a number of the closed source labs are realizing that the speed at which open source innovation is catching up is much, much faster than they may have expected.
Anjane, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you one other very important question, especially for our audience. Has the development of DeepSeek, has that changed where the money is going? We saw a lot of money going towards AI infrastructure and also energy. Does that shift where you're looking to put money to work at or where you're looking to get involved at when it comes to companies?
Look, we led Mistral Series A 2 years ago, and at the time our thesis was very simple. Like the history of computing infrastructure, whether that was storage, networking, compute, databases, the enterprise, which is really the vast majority of where productivity comes from, always tends to adopt cheaper, faster, and more control. And I just think that's the natural arc of computing history, and open source AI is following the same arc. And so it's not really shifting the direction we've been investing in for a while, but I do think it's energized a lot of us. The speed at which the enterprise is now adopting, especially in the United States, open source AI has been fantastic. I do think European enterprises are lagging. I think that's been a big topic of conversation here, is what can European enterprises do to cooperate with America and her allies to adopt the latest and greatest in open source AI. So it's the same direction. Things are just moving much faster.